Okay, class 9. Main things, going to go over the concepts of chapter 11 and 12, and then I'm going to do some examples. Good news is most of this stuff we've seen before. So whenever we did the JavaScript, we talked about exceptions like the try-catch stuff. It's no different in Java, really. Again, there's compile time exceptions and then runtime exceptions. Compile time, that's what your IDE takes care of for you. Whenever you say, hey, run this thing, it'll say, I can't run it because, and then it'll give you an exception. So as it compiles, it throws an exception. And then there's the runtime exceptions, where as your program's running, it should be fine, but oftentimes this is due to users putting in something different than what you expect. That's usually the most common reason for these runtime exceptions. And so you need to be careful about, users not putting in the right stuff, or it doesn't even have to be like users. It could be other systems. Because remember, in Java, oftentimes it's like an API layer where other systems are asking for information. If they ask for information incorrectly, an exception might be thrown. And that was pretty much it. That's short, sweet, exceptions. I'll go over some examples in code, but some tools in IntelljI. We have talked about Gradle just a little bit, but and again, you don't really need to be an expert at Gradle. I've used Maven in every professional setting that I've done. I've heard of some people using Gradle, but I'm more familiar with Maven. But all it is it's a system that builds your code for you. So it's for a developer experience. Like your code, once it's built, nobody knows if you used Gradle or Maven or Ant or whatever builds you want to use. That's the same thing in JavaScript. If you have a React application, you can build it with Vite, you can build it with Node, you can build it with Webpack probably, you can build it with whatever you want to, but your end result is going to be the same. Now, the big difference between builders is usually build times. So Gradle, if I build something in Gradle versus build something in Maven, there might be a build time difference. And then like how they do it and the efficiencies of how they build it, that's usually what you care about. That's why with React, the builder they've said is the best is Vite, because Vite is a little quicker than your original builder that like I think it was Node that built that. So, or Webpack. I can't remember. I'm not a front-end developer, so I don't have them all fresh on the top of my mind. I have to Google it every time. But I know that the reason they went with Vite is because it's faster to build. So when you hit the build on a big, huge application, it's going to just build faster and more efficiently. So that's all that it's the builder. It's not how your code runs. It's because your code is going to be the Java code that's packaged in a jar. And then it's going to run on top of a server, which is the Tomcat server. And that Tomcat server usually comes because of Spring. Spring injects that server. So actually how to build it is different than how it runs. And so the Gradle is how it's building. It's all the tasks, the plugins, the dependencies, the configurations, the repositories, and how those all get built together to get your code so it's executable. So you don't need to know all the inner workings of it. You do need to know that your code depends on other code. For instance, when we start up a Spring service, we have a dependency of that Spring starter web. If we want a web service, we got to have a dependency somewhere for something, and we're choosing Spring as our main dependency. The configurations are kind of built in, but we'll talk more. Another reason why I don't know why this is right here is when we get into our SQL stuff, the MySQL stuff, you'll see that we have to actually put in properties and configurations, and we'll bring in dependencies manually. So we will touch on this. I just don't want to give you some concrete examples right now because there's no reason for most of these right now. But whenever we look at our code, I will show you the build Gradle file just so that you can see what's in there, just to refresh your mind. But again, do not focus too much on Gradle. You need to know that it's a build tool. You need to know that Maven is the other common one out there. And you need to know that the main thing it does is it packages all of the dependencies, and it uses this like this thing called dependency injection, where it knows what dependencies rely on each other, and it injects those dependencies where they're needed to build your code in a way that is runnable. So it's taking all of that stuff that you used to have to know to build code. You don't have to know it anymore. It knows how to do it, and you just rely on it. So it talked a little bit about Gradle, and then it also talked about debugging. So there's the breakpoints, there's the add watch. Something I didn't type in here, but it does have is the conditional. I'm not going to show a live example of that because I've never done it, but I know that it's possible, and I know that the video showed it. So I might show that later. I just didn't have a good example right here. But the breakpoint we've talked about, the flow, I'm going to go over the different ones hopefully today. But there's a step over, which just goes line by line. There's a step into, which if you're calling a function, what it does is it steps into the function. If you just do the step over, it'll just do the next line. It won't go inside the function for you. But if you do step into, it'll go into the function that's on that line. And then if you just step out of, it'll ignore the rest of the stuff in that function and come back out to where that function was called at. So there's a step into and step out of. And then there are different panes, like window panes, that you can see and view in there. He talks about some. I don't know if those are the same anymore, so I didn't put them on here. But debugging, we'll go over some of that. I did have a lot of good questions. Unfortunately, I don't think that I'm going to answer them to the best of what you guys would want, but I'm going to read these off and then answer them to the best of my ability. So how much of the Gradle section in the last chapter do we really need to know? I think I did address this a little bit, but the Gradle, you need to know what it kind of is, and what dependencies you'll need to bring in, but that's not Gradle specific. That's just, even if we used Maven, you would need to know that. But you just need to know that it's a build tool. Yeah. On this next one, when should we create our own exceptions versus like really focusing on the built-in ones versus just throwing a brand new exception right in line with the message? Like, why do we do each of these? And a lot of it, I'm not having good examples of these for you right now. But just imagine whenever your code gets big enough, if I throw an exception, I may or may not know, like, I may want to be more specific with my exception so that I know what it is. And again, every team is going to use exceptions differently. I've talked to some people that are like, you should never use exceptions because you can just write your code in ways that do what you need it to do without writing exceptions, where other people love exceptions. And when they write specifically for an exception, which is kind of like a breaking point in your code. So if you do a try and then you're going through and then you hit an exception and throw an exception, it'll ignore the rest of the stuff in there and it'll go straight to the catch block and then execute that. So it's just depending on your preference. It depends on your team. But again, you can get away with everything as a beginner and never throw an exception. You do sometimes have to handle exceptions. And again, those won't make a lot of sense until we get further on in some of the interfaces that we use in Unit 3. You will have to bring in interfaces, especially with web development, that it's going to throw, it has the potential to throw an exception. And whenever it has a potential to throw an exception, you do have to handle that. Whether that's manually or just saying, I know that it's there, just ignore it. But again, that's not very good for you guys because you don't have a concrete example right now. But hopefully hopefully I do iterate that every coding team has their own preference. Some really like exceptions, to some never use exceptions, and everything in between. So for you guys, how much should you invest in this? Not a lot. Knowing about try catch and how those work, absolutely, you have to know how those work because you'll see it in other people's code. But should you really be creative and throwing exceptions as an entry-level programmer? No, I wouldn't worry about it as much as reading it. If you see an exception somewhere, you need to be able to decode it and understand what it means. The thing with the system.line separator, so a system, what Java does with system is it evaluates the system that it's running on. So it can kind of figure out if it's a Windows or a Mac device. And then when it says system.line separator, I think we talked about it briefly last time that Windows has a different line separator than Mac by default. Some do /n and then some do /n/r. So when you use the system.line separator, it's supposed to look at your system and use that line separator. Supposed to. As you can see in the tests, it's not always working as expected. I think the question was more or less what's going on with this. And unfortunately, I cannot answer those questions to what your guys' liking to be. I can just explain what it is. I cannot explain the reasons why LaunchCode does whatever it does. What I can explain, though, when you are writing your test, which I think is task 4 on the graded assignment, you do not have to use line separator. You can use whatever you want to, as long as it passes the test. So if you're really, really worried about using this system.line separator, don't be. Just use /n every time, or do the print ln every time, and you'll be fine. In your test, you won't do print line, and in your test, you'll build the string, and in the string, you'll have a /n. So do not overthink that for this graded assignment. It is important to know that system means the current system that it's running on. Line separator is the /n or the /n/r. I'm going to, I forgot to pull it up. I was going to show you somebody's GitHub not working and show you, but whenever you run and that one's easier to show you than it is to talk about. But in GitHub, whenever you see that something failed, you can, it runs it in the console right there. So you're not going somewhere else. In your action, there's a little drop down thing, and it's a lot of code that looks really, it's not code, it's like console logs written all out. And it will tell you which tests at least fail. So it'll tell you why it failed. I'll try to pull up somebody's right at the end. When I do, I'm going to write that down or I'm going to forget. When I do that, I probably will not put that on the recording though, just because I probably will pull up somebody's code that's in this class. And I don't care about the code as much as the action, and I don't want that on the recording. So, so where should you be right now on the assignment? A good middle ground would be finish with task 1, potentially task 2. I can't remember that. The first 3 tasks all blend together in my mind because it's just like making the thing work. And then task 4 is the test. And maybe even test 5. I'll have to relook. And then test 6 is like refactor everything. And again, I think that one's going to be your longest one with lots of errors and lots of debugging and lots of everything. So yeah, test 1, yeah, it didn't tell you. Yeah, task 1 might have been just read it. So you should be somewhere task 2, task 3 probably. And then from now till Thursday, you might start looking at the test codes and writing your own test code. I think that's where the middle ground. Okay. I'll definitely bring it up and we can look at it later on the exact tasks. I did find out, I think that's due, I didn't look at, I think it's on a Monday, the 16th. I know it's the 16th. The 16th is a Thursday. Obviously, I got that wrong. So, but I know it's the 16th. I looked up that date. So, grade assignment 2 due on the 16th. You still have a little while. That's like a little over 2 weeks. So definitely by next week on Monday, you should have pretty much everything except the refactoring done. I think that's probably it. All right. Again, I don't have a lot going on here. Because we are talking about the graded assignment, let's go ahead and do that now because I will forget later. So these are is it just 5 tasks? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so 1 says explore. 2 says create the support classes. And then step 3 is complete the job class. So those are the 3 tasks there. I thought they were down here, maybe at the bottom. Yeah, there we are. So you're just going to review the employer class. So yeah, there's not much code there. And then you're going to add the setter getters and custom methods as needed to these classes. Remember, you're just going to do the generate code. Do not overthink that. The only one that you'll have to kind of think about is the toString later. What you will do is you'll generate the toString and then modify it once you generate it. And so step 3, so that's where I would be completing this job class of using what you learned in step 1 and 2. This is where you should be right now, either finishing this or right in the middle of this thing. And then by next Monday, you should be on step 5. So on Thursday, you should have at least looked at the unit testing. If not, try to do a couple unit tests. And that's where a lot of people were asking questions about the unit test. Do not overthink this. I know some of you are copying and pasting from this, like the unit test that they have. But if you feel more comfortable in going back to when you actually had unit test, whatever chapter that was, unit testing chapter 6, if you want to go back to chapter 6 and look at some of the examples here, I think that would probably be better. Do they even have examples? So it's this, but yet you want certain things. And then if you need to do a string, I thought they had an example of one. Yeah, just look at this one and look at the exercises that we've already done that are in your IntelliJ and just copy and paste from there if the graded assignment ones look too complicated. All right. Fine. If you have questions about graded assignment, definitely post them, but I think I'm going to move on. And I really don't have much more, so probably about 30 minutes or so, and then I might be done. So I did want to show off the examples just so that you can see them and we can talk through them. So the temperature example, they said enter a temperature. What you were supposed to do is change this so that if the Fahrenheit they give is less than the absolute 0 Fahrenheit, it's going to throw this new exception that with this message. And it's going to catch it, and then it's going to set the Fahrenheit. And then whenever you create a new exception, again, this is where somebody's asking, why am I even doing this? And I can understand where you're saying that. And that's why I have rarely seen custom exceptions in Java. Again, the only time I've done them is in Go, but Go handles exceptions a little differently than Java. So in Java, I haven't really done a lot of custom exceptions, but you're just going to rename it more or less. So this temperature exception is just a generic exception. It's just the title of it is now different, so that whenever I run this, did I run this one? Run this one. So when I run this one and it says enter the whatever, if I put in something that's way too low, instead of it just saying exception, it actually tells me the type of exception. So that's really the only thing you're doing is creating so that the description right here is very specific on the type, and then the message is still the message. So again, if I didn't do that, if I just did New exception. So this says, I think sometimes I can no, I don't think I can. So this one says temperature exception. If I just rerun this now, I do the same thing. It says exception instead of the temperature exception. That's the only thing different. It says the temperature is too low. So I understand why some people are like, well, the message tells me what I really want. But imagine that you have, 1,000 files of code and you're dealing with 50 different things. Having a named exception could help. So again, should you be thinking about it even whenever you're doing your small projects in Unit 3? Probably not. I wouldn't force this exception thing on you. So if you don't make a custom exception in Unit 3, that's perfectly fine. You just need to know about it because you might hit code that talks about it. No, you wouldn't have to create a new class. So that's where I'm saying, yeah, where I can understand with just the small amount of code that you guys are dealing with, I don't know if I would see it absolutely necessary to create a custom exception. But again, we're trying to prepare you to go into the job where you might be working on a code base big enough that they do have custom exceptions and that are valid reasons why to do it. Again, it's hard whenever the code is so small. So, and then this is the other code. They gave you most of this. You're supposed to call a divide or make a divide function that whenever you divide, it's going to say what the student grade is. But if you can't divide by 0, so if it divides by 0, you'll get an arithmetic exception, and it'll say you cannot divide by 0. So if I run this one, this one says you cannot divide by 0. So here's the question that some people were asking. Hopefully this will make a little sense. Let's not do the try catch. So right here, I'm just going to get rid of the try catch. So it's going to figure this out and it's going to print out the grade. So this is what it's done before. I'm going to rerun it without the try catch. Do you see how it just stopped everything and it stopped processing anything else further? It did not ask for the names with the files. It did print out divided by, you can't divide by 0 because there's an exception there, like it stopped it, but it didn't give me Carl, Brad, Elizabeth, and Stephanie's programs like it originally did. This is the reason why you do try catch. Now again, on this small scale, does it matter? Could I instead just do, this is what I would probably do, if y is not equal to 0, could I do this and then do like an else? Something like this. I mean, this is checking for it, and then I'm saying it. So this should work, which it does. You cannot divide by 0, but it prints it here. But do you see how down here it still doesn't ever tell me that an exception, it still never tells me that something bad happened with the 0? So again, think about how when you're writing code, sometimes you want to flag something as really bad. but you don't want to stop your code from happening. Meaning my code still happened. Elizabeth, Stephanie, Carl still happened. If I don't do this, and it does hit an exception, that other stuff does not happen. I can't see the rest, like it stops everything, it doesn't go further. So this is where, well, which one's better? Well, you don't want this to happen. You don't want it so that whenever your code tries to run, it says failed. You don't want that. So should I throw an exception and catch it? Or should I do an if statement around it because I know that that's a possibility? Either one of those are valid. But each team will decide which one is the better approach. So the difference is if I throw an exception, I can hold that later and it'll come down somewhere else and show me. So let me, this is 0, yeah. So it tells me that I cannot divide by 0. So it's telling me that. This one does the E stack trace. Let's see if this is doing what I'm, yes, okay. So if I do this print stack trace, if you look, my code ran successful right here. The E is, I'll explain that in just a second. So my code said it build successful. You need that as a programmer. If I throw the print stack trace, or if I throw this, if I print out this error, if you look down below, it tells me that I actually ran across 2 exceptions, but it still did not fail my build. And I know those are just minor little things, but I can look for these exceptions in my observability tool. So like there's like Datadog, there's all these different, there's a watch feature in AWS. There's all these different observability tools that we will not talk about in LaunchCode, but I can look for these exceptions in my watch observability tool, where if I don't ever throw these exceptions ever, I may not be able to know what exceptions there are out there. So it just depends on what your code wants. Do you want to just handle it and never throw an exception? You can do that. Instead of doing this try catch thing here, again, we can just go back to the if y is not equal to 0. Do this. Else, print out, and then down here, where am I throwing this? Throw this thing. Instead of throwing this thing, I can just print out so now whenever I run it, of course there is. Hold on. I didn't refactor this properly. All right. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of the try and the catch. Is that gonna? This is what happens when I don't try this ahead of time. So it says this file name is empty. Oh, that's because I didn't put a number. Hold on. So this means else. I'm going to print this out and then I'm going to return the -1 that originally, I forgot about that. Whenever this is, it returns the -1, I commented it out, but I didn't account for it up here. So that was my issue. Okay, so if I just handle it without exceptions, cannot divide by 0, it tells me that the file name is empty and it gives me a -1. And you can see that there's no exceptions in there at all. And my build was successful. Some teams will want this. And that's how most of you probably think more naturally, because exceptions are still kind of a foreign concept. LaunchCode's just teaching you that there are other ways to do things. You will see exceptions thrown. Now, do you purposely throw them like they are teaching here? Or do you just handle the ones that are already going to get thrown, like the out of bounds? Like if I don't do the not equal to 0 here, there will be an error here, an exception thrown. It just depends on the team. So hopefully I explained at least a little bit of that. Right. Okay. Oh, I didn't ask for the E. Yes, but E is the it's just the variable. Here, I'll show that. So when I throw this thing in a try block, when I throw an exception, instantly, it's not going to run any of the rest of this. It's going to instantly go down. As soon as this exception happens, it's going to go straight to the catch. And the catch is catching this. So it's like a parameter that you're passing in a function. And this parameter that I'm passing in is a file name exception. That's the type. And then E is the variable. So I can name this error if I want to. It's just then I need to make this error. So this variable is whatever I'm using here. And sometimes I see E and sometimes I do see error. E is more common just because if it's in a catch and you see E, you know it's an error. They don't have to type it out every time. Okay, if I did not answer one of your questions, you might have to re-ask it, because I think I've answered all these. So I did say, I don't know why Microsoft has this background, but it was the daily background for today. So there you go, Minecraft with bees. Okay. I'm going to do a couple different things here. I'm going to try my best. But I'm going to incorporate Git in with it, because that was the other thing that some people saw. So I'm going to take this pet thing that I talked about last time. So I'll refresh this in a second. We're going to do some branching with some merging. And then we're also going to do some exceptions. And then hopefully even write a new class. And we're going to have some fun. Again, I did not do this ahead of time, so I thought about it about 15 minutes ahead of this lecture. So if something totally messes up, know that we may or may not complete this. If we don't complete it, though, I will complete it before next lecture and show you the final copy of it. But I cannot guarantee that we will have working code at the very, very end of this. So, all right, I'm going to take a drink first. All right. This is the pet store application that I built last time, just to show you how to use Spring, how to get a controller up, and how to get it linked up with GitHub. And then we made something very similar to what they suggested, where there were these endpoints, different endpoints, and then we had some Git and Post. And I took out the form that we created here. I'm going to put that back, but I'm going to use Git and show you how to do some things with that. And then I temporarily commented out the pet model and went back to just, I took this name and go straight in there. I don't actually make a new pet, but that's what we're going to add into this. What I want to do is add a new model of house. and then you can put pets in the house. So that's what I'm hoping. First thing I want to do though, let's go back to the actual lesson here. This application.properties is where we're going to start putting properties at. You should not have had to worry about this before, but in the next couple weeks, you're going to have to deal with that. That's where it is right there. But they do talk about this build.gradle. So remember, plugins are just plugins that it knows IntelliJ and Gradle know to bring in. It knows to bring in Java. And then if you look at Java down here, it says that we want Java 17. If you look at the Spring Framework boot, so Spring Boot, this is the version. Dependency management will pull in. Repositories, this is where it actually goes and gets the repositories. If you're really nerdy about this, you can hover, hold the control on your keyboard and then hover over this. This actually goes into your Gradle. I don't know if you can see that, but it's my Gradle wrapper. And this file right here, this repository handler, is in your Gradle wrapper. And it's going to Maven Central, and it's, doing whatever, it's grabbing Maven artifacts. And then the dependencies, starting before Thursday, you're going to actually have to add your time leaf dependency right here. So you're going to have to add this time leaf dependency right here. You can do it either whenever you sign up and do the start.spring.io, you can just have a time leaf and select it and it'll automatically put it in there. Or with any dependency, you can actually add it in afterwards. You just need to find this thing. You're going to do implementation and then find this thing right here, which you can find on the start.spring.io. So you can bring in any dependency after the fact and that'll still work. Because I'll probably use this pet store one as like my go ahead project even for next time, I'm just going to add it in manually next time whenever we switch to time leaf, so that whenever we do the pet form, I don't have to do it in HTML inside my controller. I'll actually do it in time leaf. That's your dependencies. And remember, they said they have tasks. There's a test task that they're using JUnit. So again, you don't need to know every single thing about this. The key things that you do need to know is that you're bringing in Spring Boot, and here's the version numbers. Eventually, version numbers will matter. When you're dealing with old code, the version really does matter on what it's capable of and what it works well with other versions. So that is one thing that eventually, everything we're doing is new enough that we're going to always use newer versions. But when you're dealing with old code, it does become a problem. And then dependencies, these are very important. So dependencies and version numbers are the two big takeaways. I think that's all about Gradle that you absolutely need to do. All right, so on this pet, so just a reminder, what we have done before. Let me get my, I do not have this running, so nothing should work right now. So whenever I go here, it just keeps spinning and it says it has no connection. It says I'm offline. It means that my server is not running. So I want to make it run, but I've already told you in my pet controller, my create form, I don't have my form in here. So right now I am on my main branch. And whenever you're working with the team, what you're going to do is you're going to create a new branch for every feature that you made. So I'm going to say here, and I'm going to say, name my branch. I'm going to add create form. That's my branch name because this is what I'm doing. So your branch names should match what you're trying to accomplish in this branch. So I'm going to hit create branch. And it automatically checks it out for me. That's why there's this little tag there, because I'm actually on my create form branch. and I can confirm it down at the bottom. Just because somebody else brought it up earlier, it's not red anymore. So create form is my branch. So now anything I do, such as I don't know if you remember, but I had this thing here. Paste that right there. So this is the form that I had last time. So I'm not going to go over everything, but it's going to have it's going to go to the create. It's going to be a post method, and I'm going to send in the name and the species for it. And now I need to make sure that it works. I just have this get pane. If you don't have the get pane, I've always had the get pane. And it's like get down here too. Like these are all the different things you can do, but it's just your panes might be moved around because you can obviously just move these around however you want to. I always have my get. Yeah, next to your terminal, because I can bring up a terminal as well. And you can bring up any of these problems. Looks like I have lots of problems. But yeah, the get. I'm going to run this. So I definitely want to run this. Hit run. It says here that application started. So that means if I go back to here and I hit create, this means that my server is running. But this also means that I don't have a path for this thing right here. And so if I go back, my actual path that I want to go to is create form. So I'm going to do create form, and here's my form. And then whenever I type in my name, it pulls it up and it creates the pet. Right. So hopefully you saw I have working code right now. So anytime I have working code and I have done what my feature is made to do, now I need to commit and make sure that, and then push it up. So I'm going to do git add just in case. And this is where this LF and CRLF, that's that like Windows versus Mac stuff, that line endings, like line separators. This is the reason why you guys are having problems. You usually just ignore it. So I'm going to do git commit with the message of added create pet form. It says that I did that, so then I'm going to do git push. Because it does not know that, because GitHub does not know about this brand new branch that I created, because I created it locally, it says GitHub doesn't know what you want, so I got to copy and paste this. I'm setting the upstream. I am pushing it to this upstream add create form. And now if I go to this thing right here, which is my GitHub, I have my main branch and I have my add create form branch. If I wanted to, it says that this has 3 commits, so I can hit on this commit thing, and my added create pet form commits right here. So if I click on this, it'll actually tell me, I didn't really care if this was added, but you saw me put this in, so it added that. But this is where it adds the format. So it tells me what this commit actually did. So again, what I did was I went to code. I care about which branch I'm on. So I didn't push it to main, I pushed it to this branch. And then when I go to commits here, it'll tell me that the first commit, prep for branches, add, that's the one I just did. And then when I click in, it'll tell me all my changes for that commit. My problem is if you go to this pet store it'll default to main, and main only has 2 commits. If I go to my, nope. If I go to my pet controller, if I go down here to the create form, my form is not in there. So I need my form to be in there. So I am going to switch back. So I'm going to go back to my main. I know that I have back to my main because it's main down here, and my create pet form, it went away. Because remember that this branch doesn't know anything about that commit. But then I can do a git merge with my add create form. And it says here that it's doing a fast forward merge. If you get to select, I always select the fast forward merge because it doesn't create a merge commit and the old commit. It makes just one commit. And it tells me here that the build Gradle, there was 1 line change there. And on this one, there was 25 line changes, 1 deletion, and I guess 24 lines of adds or something. So it's telling me what changed. It should have pulled it in. If I go back to my pet controller, there's my form. So my form is now in. So if I go back to this get pane here, it says that my add create form have these 3. My main also has these 3, but you can see this little arrow right there. It's saying that this thing right here, my origin main, my origin main's actually on this commit, but my local main is on this commit. So that means I need to push it up. I can't just say push. I got to git push. And now whenever I go to my pet store and I go to my main, it now has the 3 commits on it, which has the added create pet on my main. So both of these are the same now because I merged them together. Git is something that takes you multiple attempts, mess ups, watching again. So if this is still like, I kind of getting it, but not really, that you're in the perfect spot for that. So that's right where you're supposed to be. Let's do some more stuff and commit it. So, okay, so I want to do a new feature. I need a house. I need a house to store my pets in. So I'm going to do git checkout -b. This creates a new branch. It'll pull it from whatever branch I'm on right now. So it's going to pull it. It's going to format it to be my main branch at first. Like that's what initially it's going to look like. And then I'm going to say add house model. So it switched to my new branch, add house model. Here in a second, IntelliJ will finally catch up, and it'll show down at the bottom down here. I'm on, there it is. Finally, it catches up there. So it's add house model. So then I'm going to go over here. I'm going to make a new Java class called house. Whenever you get into Git, there are different ways of doing things. Yes, I have my preferences that I learned from my old team, and since my new team, I was the Git master on it. I said, this is how we're doing it. I use Rebase for almost everything I do. I know how to get the final thing to look how I need it to. And so even whenever I help some of you, this is where whenever you get on project 3, you will have merge conflicts. You will have people that are like, it's not that anybody's doing anything wrong per se, but there will be Git conflicts. There just always is during Unit 3. I love stepping in and helping with that. The biggest thing that I can say to help with any of this is commit anytime you have working code. If you can commit every time you have working code and you can just get in that, routine, it will help you dramatically. Now, the hard part is it is weird to have like 17 commits on one branch. It seems a little excessive. So if it's on your main branch, you're merging in all these commits from everybody else. It makes sense to have lots of commits on your main, but on your feature branch, usually you only have like 1 to 4 commits. Now, if you have 17, I'd rather you have 17 with all good saves rather than 2, and then there's a big chance that something blew up. So the more commits you have, kind of the better. But in the real world, if you go and you make a feature branch and then you have 17 added commits into your main, your team will not like that. So just balance that. Yeah, there are some, like there's this commit one over here. Yeah, you just have to search the sides. You have a left side, you have a bottom, and you have right side. So even this Gradle is on the right. So you can move this anywhere. So I can technically move this Git over here and it'll open up on this side over here. So you can move these toolbars around any way you want to. I always put my Git on the bottom. So I changed my okay, so good question. What do you mean by feature branch? So a feature branch, anytime I want to add something to my code, that's a feature, anytime. So if I said on this, this feature enhancement that I want to do is add a house so that I can put my pets in. So that's my feature. And then my branch is going to be very specific to that feature. The only code I'm writing in this feature branch is for that feature. And what that does is it sections off those features so that other people can still work. And then we're going to add features however we need to when we have multiple people. I'm not going to do that today because that's like a couple steps down the road. But the whole purpose of having a branch is to have a very specific purpose for the code in that branch, which is usually called a feature. Okay, so the question is, well, why are we doing these branches anyway? If you are the single sole contributor of code, then you don't need to do branches. On the other hand, so I was working with a former student that's creating a small little side project, and I gave him 4 different tasks to complete. Well, he started working on the first one and then did not get it fully complete. So then he went to the second one. What he did was he created a branch for all 4 tasks that I'm asking for all 4 features, and then he can work on 2 different features at the same exact time on 2 different branches and just switch back and forth and test between both of them. And then whichever one works first, he can merge that one into the main branch first, and it's not going to affect the other one. So if you want to try 2 different things, having different branches for those 2 different ideas separates your code, so you're not like putting in code for one feature and then taking it away and putting in a code for another feature and then taking it away and flipping back and forth. Your branching does that for you. You just say, hey, go to this branch, it knows what code you're talking about, or go to this other branch and it knows what code you're talking about. So on this one, I'm purposely going to add Java class called house. This house, so every house is supposed to have an owner. And I could do so much with this, but right now all we care about are pets. So I'm going to do pet. And then anytime you have an array list, you You can do this new array list in your constructor, or you can just do it up here. I like doing it up here. And then again, I'm not going to rewrite code. I'm just going to go to this generate constructor, my constructor. I'm going to do two of them. I'm just going to have, if they just want an owner, then this sets the pet. So I can just do whatever I want to there. Or if they wanted to set the first pet along with the owner, I'm gonna say that too. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and do all the setters and getters. And then like we've done before, I am gonna make my own where I'm gonna be able to add a pet. So I can add a pet at any time. And then at some point, I'm just going to go ahead and generate it, but I'm not going to probably use it right now. I am going to use a toString so that I can print this out. So again, I'm making a house. It's going to have an owner, pets, etc. All right. First thing I'm going to do I'm going to make a way to create a home. You're going to have to, I am a slow typer. You're just going to have to bear with me. Hopefully you can use this time to think through what I'm trying to do. So if I do this, what I want to do is I want to make a new house. Anytime you get this red here, you see how if you hover over, it says Alt Enter. So I'm just going to hit Alt Enter. Oh, I don't know why I said new there. I was thinking logically, not syntax wise. And then I'm going to say return. All right, something like this. And we're just going to see if this works. So then I hit the run. Go back here. What endpoint? Create home. I'm going to put owner as Philip. It says created home for Philip. All right. Now, logically, most people would say, well, it must have created the home, right? But based on what I have here, I don't know if it did. So I want to go ahead and do a system out, and I want to go ahead and print out the house. Just because what that's going to do is down here in my console log, it'll actually print it out to see if it actually did create the house. So I'm going to rerun this. I'm going to redo the thing real quick. And what I'm doing here is I'm just confirming this still stayed the same. And it said it now has a house, Philip's the owner, and there's no pets in there. So I'm just confirming that I created a house. I don't need that now because I already know what I'm doing now. Okay, so now what I want to do is whenever I create a pet, okay, so let's do branching now. So I'm good here. I created so that it created a house. So in my terminal, I'm going to say get add dot. I'm going to say get commit with a message added endpoint to create house. And then I'm going to do a get push. And remember, I have not, like if I go to GitHub right now and I go to my code, I have an add create form, but I don't have an add house branch because I never pushed it up to GitHub. That's why this is telling me, hey, we don't see it up in GitHub. Do you want to set it up in GitHub? And I'm going to say yes. Go ahead and set it up in GitHub to be this add house model. So an endpoint is just is like the is the URL of what you're trying to hit. So endpoint is a URL. So if you have this RESTful tool, now this I might have actually downloaded. I might have actually installed this one. I don't know if this one came generic like in there. But I've used this before. So my RESTful tool will actually tell me all of my endpoints that I can use. And then it tells me all 4 of them. And you can see the P means post. These are gets. And it'll actually let me send to them. For instance, if I said owner Philip and I hit send here, the response, yeah, I have no clue. It should have. This sometimes works. I can't remember how to get this to work all the time. But I usually use it for my endpoints. I know there's 4 endpoints. Oh, I can't put in the owner into the body. That's why I put my owner into here. So if I do this, no, it still doesn't. No, I can't send a body. Select the display type of the body. I don't want a body. Yeah, I can't. I've used this before, but I haven't used it. Oh, I can probably set something up later for it, but it does tell you what the URLs, what the endpoint should be. So if you copied and pasted this thing right here and put in the name and the species, this thing should work. It might also be because I'm not running it. That's exactly what it is. Hold on. Let me run this. Say it's running. So it says it's running. So now whenever I do this owner thing here, if I go and put in created home for Philip. So this is an easier way to check your stuff real quick. So if I wanted to do the create species, you know, I can say, now, of course, this is the actual text that comes back. And do you see how this doesn't look very friendly? Like, because I'm hoping that my HTML actually reads this. So just know that it's a very use case. You're not going to use this for everything, but these are all the endpoints. Yeah, RESTful tool. Yep. But endpoint, whenever I say endpoint, I'm talking about these 4 things right here. These are API endpoints. What was I doing? Oh, so if I go back to GitHub and I refresh this, it'll tell me now that I actually have add house model. And it'll tell me that there's 4 commits there. But if I go back to my main, it says I still only have 3 commits. So I'm just going to leave it alone for a second, and I'm going to just ignore it. And now what I want to do is add it so that I can actually create a house and add a pet. So I'm going to go to my terminal. I'm going to say git checkout -b because it's a new branch. I'm actually wanting it off of the add house model. So I'm going to, because I want that house model to be in my new branch. And I'm going to say add pet to house. So the feature that I want to add is adding the pet to the house. So I switched my branch name. So anything I do now will only be in this add pet to house. So down here, our form works. So not only do I want to not return my pet though, do I want to make a pet? I want to say house.add pet. I'm saying, I actually know what's going on, but this is where you guys logically would be like, I want to add a pet to this house that I just added right here. I just added one, but I can't see it down here. And this is a scope issue. The scope of this house was created right here. And if you remember, one of my tricks are, if I just close whatever is inside this house, if I close this, that's the only place that house is viewable, is inside this thing right here. Because if I close this, I can't see it outside of it. So the scope of this house is just right there. Now, if I put my scope up here and I say house, and I just leave it, and then I say, hey, use this house. Now my scope is no longer just in here because I actually created the house out here, which means that my scope is anywhere inside this public controller, which I guess it doesn't even let me close. But yeah, this would be the whole entire thing. So now, if I go down here, you can see houses there. And now I have that add pet, and I can add my pet. And again, because I want to see if this works or not, I'm just going to print out to the console my house. I'm going to save this. I'm going to rerun this. So it's running. So because I'm not saving this in a database, hopefully you do understand my house did not get saved. The one that I created before, anytime I hit this refresh or restart, all of the memory gets wiped. So I do have to go and recreate this house. So luckily I had this URL right there. I'm going to hit it. And so I created a house for Philip. And then I want to then go to the create form. And I'm going to say Doug the dog. I'm going to create my pet. And it says here that I created my pet. And then if I go down here, it says that I have a house, that the owner is Philip, and I have some pets. Well, I have a pet. But I didn't put a toString on my pet. So let's go back to this thing. Generate a toString. I don't want to say pet. I just want to say, what do I want to say? I'm going to say name. Let's see if this will work. So I'm going to restart my thing. Again, when I do this, I'm going to have to go back and rerun this once my thing's up. Okay, so it's up. So I'm going to hit that. And then I'm going to do, I'm just going to start making create form, Doug, dog. There we go. So Philip has Doug the dog. Now Philip has this, and it has Doug the dog and Sally Snake. And of course, anytime I refresh this, though, it's going to be wiped. But I think this works to the point that I can commit my code now. So I'm going to go here to terminal, and I'm going to say git add, git commit, can add pets to house. I'm going to say git push. Again, I haven't added this branch, so I'm going to copy and paste this. All right. So in GitHub, where's my GitHub? There it is. So now if I refresh this, I should have 4 branches, I think. My main, create form, which we already get worked, this house, and then this pet to house. But if I go to my main doesn't have all of that. So I need to bring in, I need to, which one? Added. These are case sensitive, so you'll see me copy and paste a lot with these. And so this one's bringing in all of that stuff. And then I'm going to do git push. And again, because I'm the only one playing with this, your git pushes usually work just fine. So now whenever I look here, now it has the added endpoint to create house and add pets to house. But let's say that at any point on one of these branches, I totally messed up the whole entire code. I have my main branch to fall back to. Then the question is, well, do I need a branch when I could just roll back to a certain commit? Meaning right here, let's say that this last one was horrible. I can just right click on this and I can reset my current branch to here at any point. So as long as I have commits somewhere that has the right code that I want, I can always go back to it. But if I never commit it, then I can't go back to it. So the long story short, always commit. If you want to use feature branching and play with it, you can. I showed you at least enough. If you don't want to, I wouldn't worry about it until unit 3. But somebody got home. Okay. I did not, because even here, I don't see the purpose of having an extra exception, like a custom exception. I mean, for this one, you could say that somebody can only have 4 pets and then write an exception anytime they got over 4 pets to throw the exception. But again, you could just write logic to then print out. Instead of actually throwing an exception, you would just check and say, you can't add any more pets. Like, you don't have to throw an exception for that. So I can see either way, so I'm not going to overcomplicate it. Anything else that I did not touch on that you guys want to see in this? So somebody was asking about static here. So whenever you do the house, so the problem is with static, static means that logistically it can be accessed in weird places. But static means that it can be not even accessed, that it does not need to be instantiated. So static means that once this is set, then you're not going to do anything. So you're actually never going to have like this new house. You're going to set up a house, you're going to get it static, and then you're never going to, you'll never use a static like this, because house, I actually wanted to create a house, create an instance of a house. So static is nowhere in house anywhere, because I want to create instances of houses. I want to use the blueprint. Now, you could, in your house, have a static, a public, static, what the heck? I typed too many buttons. Static, int of max pets. Now you could do something like this, but that's all this is saying is, instead of over here, let's turn this back. I think this absolutely makes sense, but because I've went around a circle already, it may not make the greatest sense. But let's say that in my creating pet request, I can only create however many pets is allowed in the house. So I could say if house dot max pets. So here's where I would use max pets. So I'm trying to figure out if the house dot get pets dot size, there we go, is greater than or equal to this thing here, then more or less return too many pets. Ignore my bad typing. So right here, this max pets, because the max pets, if it's the same max pets for every house that I ever create, that's when I would want to make it static, because I never want to change that amongst the different houses. So if there's a variable that you never want to change, then you can do that. Now, this is actually calling the lowercase house, where I think you can even see here, it says static member access via instance, because it's the lowercase house. It's a built image of a house, not using the blueprint of a house. The blueprint of the house is the capital house, where the actual house that I'm talking about Philip's house. That's the instance of using that blueprint. So the instance, it's trying to use max pets on the instance, but it suggests going to the capital house, because that's the actual static. I can access it anywhere, even before I create a house. So if I go right here and I try to do house.add pet, it should not let me do that. This is going to throw an error because I don't have a new house yet. The problem is here, just for showing you what I'm trying to show you. Right. If I said house add pet before I actually set the house, I cannot actually add a pet because it doesn't know what this lowercase house. It has not created Philip's house yet. So I can't do it. On the other hand, if I make a static method, I can call capital house and do max pets. It's not a statement, so I would set like, there, now it's happy. I can access max pets because it's static without creating Philip's house. So that's what static means. Static means I can use this variable without creating Philip's house, without creating an instance of the blueprint. So I can create this. I cannot access something inside the house without creating the actual house. I have to create Philip's house before I can add a pet to it. But the max number of pets I can play with just knowing what a house is. That's where static comes in. And if I got rid of the static here, and I go back here, it's going to say, hey, you need to make this static because now you told us, because it's not static, you can't have a max number of pets without creating Philip's house first. Because if I did here, and I did house dot max pets, again, it wants me to assign it. It wants this because it is, I created Philip's house, and Philip's house has max pets assigned to it, and it's not static. This would be static, not static. Again, I went around in a circle again. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And of course, I have bad code here. So then what do? I go over here and I say, everything that I just did, roll back. Yes, roll it back. All right. Now everything that I just tried to do is away. So now this should be good code. All right. This lasted a little bit longer than I thought, but I think it was good. Hopefully it was good. I'm gonna let you guys get to studio. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm gonna stop the recording and I might show you one other thing.